Hello, my name is Stephanie Stanton, and I am here to chat with you a bit today about the performance measurement system that the City of Las Vegas has most recently implemented to be able to gauge their performance and report out metrics to the public. Coming from the private sector, which I do, performance management is an inherent part of what we do. It's involved in our operations, and everything that we do is measured based on our fiscal year. We set goals at the beginning of the year, that strategies that roll up to our overall corporate goals, and from there we are gauged in our performance. With that comes anywhere from promotions to pay increases, and everything comes to a top down and then a rolled back up methodology. In the public sector, specifically in nonprofits, we know that nonprofits tend to look more at the mission and dedicate resources to the mission rather than how they're actually measuring what they're doing to assist the public. And we find often that nonprofits don't think that they need to spend the type of resources to research and measure what they do. The interesting thing being, and with my perspective on it, because it's so inherent to what I do, I often ask nonprofits, to tell me how they're going to measure and what they think that their outcomes will be and how that rolls up to their strategy. I've seen more than a few blank faces, and having to work with nonprofits in my role, it's tough when you have to look at a nonprofit and say that we can't assist you because you don't really know what you're doing or you're not tracking against anything. So bottom line is metrics are important. The City of Las Vegas wanted to make sure that they were providing transparency, not only internally to their individual departments as they worked to advance the mission of the city and everything that they wanted to do, but also so that the public could have an eye into what was happening. The mayor and the city manager, as well as city council, agreed that this all started with data. And at the time, the data policy and the release of data wasn't a very easy process. So immediately when starting to look at performance management, they knew that they had to update their policies. And so they made the decision to revise the policy on open data and move forward with new data sharing policies and a governance system so that it could be managed in an organized manner. The city also surveyed residents to determine the key areas of improvement they sought regarding the community. The city had already had a performance management system in place called Performance Plus program, but the challenge with that is that there was no roll-up to it. There was a way that different departments could report their data, but it didn't measure against anything. And so when all was said and done, they had 600 different measurements, all of which didn't really go or roll up to anything, definitely didn't tie to a budget, and definitely were not part of any ongoing strategic plan. There were no benchmarks. There was nothing they could measure against. And so with that, and with the assistance of What Works Cities, they were able to start the process of streamlining. So as I mentioned that before, the city decided to survey residents. The city committed to streamlining programs, and they wanted to identify 4 key priorities. This came out of the survey, and those 4 key priorities were growing the economy, neighborhood livability, community risk reduction, and high-performing government. They also mandated that strategic plans and budgets for each department rolled up to the city's overall strategic plan. And then stakeholder groups were established and changes were made to how departments interacted with the executive team. They focused more on the individual performance indicators for each department and how those contributed to the established priorities. So basically it went from a mishmash of everybody kind of doing their own thing to a top-down and, again, a rolled back up where everything was benchmarked against 4 initiatives, which were then broken down, and Las Vegas officially launched their Results Vegas initiative in 2016, and it is currently in use by the city. It's relatively new, but it's created to put data on the forefront of all the basis of decisions made by the city, how they strategically plan, how they budget, as well as how the different departments can interact with executive management to further the mission of the city and each individual department. Each city department is required to create a business plan that has one key indicator and supporting measures to track against any of the priorities set forth. Once again, those priorities are growing the economy, neighborhood livability, high performance government, and community risk reduction. These again were identified through the initial survey that was taken once this process of kind of data mining and figuring out where the city was going to go next commenced. So for an example, the Office of Community Services designated that they would align with the city's wide strategic priority of neighborhood livability. And what their key performance indicator, or KPI, was that they wanted to reduce homelessness by 5% by the year 2020. And they were specifically targeting the urban core, which is wards 1, 3, and 5. This includes the Corridor of Hope, where many nonprofits who service the homeless are concentrated in a small area in downtown Las Vegas. The supporting measures act as the work or what the outputs are for each individual supporting measure. Each department is then required to report out those data inputs and make sure that each of those are put out on the Vegas Results portal. Now, this portal is open to the public. It is updated on a semi-regular basis, and it really allows citizens as well as other departments in the government to see where everyone is tracking. And that can be used as a very instrumental tool when working through the different challenges that the city is facing. The Office of Community Services identified it needed to increase the percentage of clients with stable housing and targeted gradual increases by 2020. To date, as you can see, they're short of the goal of the target of 30%. Las Vegas was a great strategic win for the city of Las Vegas. It really provided a framework for which departments could work in to be successful. They had targets. They knew what their guidelines were, and leadership from the top down were very much aligned. And only then, when you're that organized, can you move forward and be successful and be innovative, because there is transparency between the departments, so the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And in any successful organization, that transparency always has to be there. So on that front, the transparency for the organization, the government, within the organization, as well as the public, that was a great win. There are some key flaws with the methodology, though, in terms of how they rolled out the plan. And that revolves around kind of the why behind the results. So all of a sudden you have this entire platform with all of this data. And I mean, it's really overwhelming when you dig into it. And you have these dashboards and these metrics have been set. But as the average citizen, you don't know how they got to that. And as definitely as somebody coming from the outside and trying to research how they got to identify what these key citywide priorities were and the story behind it to this point, that really wasn't around. Starting with the basics of the survey that started this whole process off, where they surveyed citizens about what they did and didn't like about their government. So I think that is something that can definitely be updated in terms of what comprehensive data that they're including. Because if you are going to be completely transparent, you have to have the kind of the timeline behind it. In addition, the performance management structure that they have seems incredibly rigid. Each department sets out a fiscal year business plan. It's signed off by the city manager. It has everything laid out, documented, and from there, it doesn't look like it's being revisited again until the next fiscal year. So some of the documents that were uploaded, were uploaded in August of 2017, and doesn't look like they've been touched since then. And I have to believe, as a moving and fluid organization, that the city probably has had some changes to their strategic business plans due to challenges that have popped up in meetings or just developments within the city, new challenges it's facing, as well as the ongoing development and growth of the city. So I think that within the structure that you've created, that you need to allow some room for flexibility and to be able to modify business plans and again, share those with the public with data transparency if they are updated. It really doesn't look like there's a system for doing that, and I think that would be a great recommendation. Finally, the thing that I noticed most is that the city is very good at reporting out data when it comes to serving the public, i.e., they've filled this many information requests. They, talk about the amount of sanitation requests they've responded to, things of that nature. The one thing that you don't get out of this whole data reporting is the people themselves that are making all of this happen. You want to talk about running an efficient government, and that's a citywide priority, where none of your metrics mention anything having to do with your internal talent development, as well as retention, as well as what you're trying to do to ensure that you have engaged personnel. The only thing that's mentioned about personnel in the city of Las Vegas is how they recruit them and how quickly it takes them to get through the recruiting process. And those are the metrics that are there. So I think that there's a real opportunity there to be able to show each individual department what those departments are doing to keep their team members engaged. And I say team members, that's my lingo. I'm sure the city uses the term staff or employees, but we'll go with team members because quite frankly, when you're working for an organization that supports other people, you are part of our team. In conclusion, I think that the city's on the right track. I think that to continue to be innovative and to draw people here and to keep talent here and with all the new developing businesses, that you really have to have something to look for and to point to when you're talking about, turning this into a very healthy, successful, sustainable community. And I definitely think the city's on the right track, but it's going to take some more public input and definitely some, some leaders to step up and say, this performance management is not going to live in a vacuum. And it's not just going to be something that we're going to do, that there has to be some real meat to it and remember not to take the humanity out of the metrics. And going forward, I hope to see that the city of Las Vegas, as in their reporting platform, Results Vegas, kind of lean more towards that methodology. Now, as you can see, I've been sitting in this very cluttered room. This is my husband's man room, and it is where our computer lies. So I am going to sign off now, and I very much enjoyed researching the city. I learned a lot about their operations, and I definitely feel a sense of pride for where I live and work. So thanks, and have a great night.